say that?
Officials for punishing people for
Did you honestly say that, Professor? And you expect us,
that the First Amendment,
as a Democratic witness, to take you seriously? Are you kidding me?
I believe that you should take
You
the First
heard of
Amendment
curb
seriously,
your enthusiasm? Sir. Here's my saying, curb my nausea.
I believe that you should take the First Amendment
time has expired.
seriously.
Thank you. Senator Durbin.
Tribute to, and so I was asked if we were rethinking the Constitution, what are some of the ways we could rethink it? So that is the context of that op-ed.
Okay, I think it's interesting that of all the people that could have been selected to come testify about the dangers of limiting free speech and censorship, my colleagues on the other side chose someone who believes that the First Amendment is essentially a white male fetish. Thank you yourself in your writings, I want to ask you about it to respond, don't seem to be a very big fan of the First Amendment. You've written, and I quote, "The conception of free speech enshrined in the First Amendment reflects white, wealthy men's experiences and interests. You've described free speech advocacy as a, quote, neo-Confederate agenda. And in 2021, you published an op-ed calling for completely writing the First Amendment." Are those your comments?
Those are not entirely accurate, no. The Boston Globe piece was a thought experiment that I was invited to contribute to, and so I was asked if we were rethinking the Constitution, what are some of the ways we could rethink it? So that is the context of that op-ed.
Okay, I think it's interesting that of all the people that could have been selected to come testify about the dangers of limiting free speech and censorship, my colleagues on the other side chose someone who believes that the First Amendment is essentially a white male fetish. Thankfully, that is not in the mainstream, and that we believe that the ability to speak your mind, to express yourself, is protected by the First Amendment, is a God-given right. The government doesn't confer that upon anyone. It's our job to protect it. And I think the dangers that we've seen from the government outsourcing what it can't do itself have been laid out bare. And it's a very dangerous road to go down. And the reason why we're having this hearing is that you have every right to express a point of view that I find abhorrent. I would hope that you would defend my right to do it, to have an opinion that you disagree with. But in the previous administration, if you dared to say that masks were somehow ineffective, or that you couldn't, the COVID vaccine didn't actually prevent transmission, all those things were true, but you were deplatformed. You were told you cannot speak. You cannot engage in dissent. That is a very un-American thing, and so that's why we're gathered here today.
May I respond to the question?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I don't mean, this is your committee and I respect it, but a lot of us have other places we could be, and I would respectfully ask if we could stay off.
Thank you.
I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for having to miss the testimony of some of you, and I appreciate you coming today. Professor Franks, let me ask you, I listened to your and Ms. Hemingway's testimony and Professor Turley, so I got part of it. As I understand it, your position, Professor Franks, is that, I think you used the word myth. It is a myth that the Biden administration used government to compel speech, private speech, but that the Trump administration is doing that. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Do you think perhaps you're allowing your personal political beliefs to affect your objectivity here?
No, I do not. What is guiding my answers here is that I'm looking to see what the Supreme Court has said. You notice that in the testimony about the censorship industrial complex.
I got that part.
No, I just
want
to clarify.
No, but I've only got 5 minutes. Your answer is no, I appreciate it. Let me ask you a couple questions. You wrote a law review article in December of 2023 for the New York University Law Review, and it was about the two cases, Bruin, Supreme Court case, and Dobbs. Remember that article?
Yes, I do.
Okay. In this article, you said, I'm going to quote your words, "Taken together, these two cases demonstrate that the Supreme Court has embraced the use of the Constitution as a tool of racial patriarchy, end quote. Did you say that?
Yes.
Okay. And then you went on to say, quote, when the Supreme Court declares that there is a constitutional right to armed self-defense in public, it openly embraces and promotes a culture that privileges white men's ability to terrorize and kill those that they perceive as threats, close quote. Did I read that correctly?
I believe so. Thank you for reading.
Okay. And did you also say in that article, I'm going to quote again, quote, by simultaneously expanding white men's right to kill and constricting women's right not to die, this Supreme Court, referring to the current United States Supreme Court, has turned the Constitution into a homicide pact as well, close quote. Did you write that?
That sounds like me.
Okay. In November of 2024, you tweet, don't you?
I'm not sure what the current terminology is for it, but yes, I am sometimes on the social platform that was formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, you're on a lot, aren't you?
I'm not sure what the relevance of that is.
You're trying to be provocative on there, don't you?
Again, I'm not sure what the relevance
Well,
of this
let
question
me
is.
show you the relevance. On November 7th, 2024, from your tweet, here's one of your tweets at 2:41 p.m., quote, the majority of Americans hate women. The majority of Americans hate women more than they love anything, including democracy, close quote. Did I read that correctly?
I am not sure what this has to do with the subject matter of this
Did you
hearing.
say it?
I do not have those words in front of me. I probably said something along those lines, but
Yeah,
what is
you
the
said it.
relevance of
Here
that
it
to
is,
this
big as
hearing?
Dallas, right there.
Yes.
But your political beliefs don't impact your feelings about President Biden or President Trump.
I don't have feelings about either of them. What I have
Sounds
is
to me
doctrine.
like your favorite feeling is anger. Let me ask you this. You issued another tweet. This was in May of 2022. You've just been tweeting up a storm. You said, quote, there's a reason why the conservative-dominated Supreme Court thinks the Constitution does not contain a right to an abortion, but is convinced that it contains an individual right to possess firearms. And that reason is white male supremacy, close quote. Did I read that correctly?
Is there a question in this?
Did I read that correctly? That's
Is there
my
a question that is relevant to this hearing?
Did I read that correctly? Do you really think that the United States Supreme Court, you're an officer of the court, is guided by white male supremacy?
I believe that the First Amendment prohibits the president
Did you
and other
say
state
that?
officials for punishing people for
Did
their
you honestly say that, Professor?
I
And you
believe
expect us,
that the First
as a
Amendment,
Democratic witness, to take you seriously? Are you kidding me?
I believe that you should take
You
the First
heard of
Amendment
curb your
seriously, sir.
enthusiasm? Here's my saying, curb my nausea.
I
Thank you.
believe that you should
The
take
time
the First
has
Amendment
expired. Thank
seriously.
you. Senator Durbin.
It's a nice title for you to have. It's good to get to be on this committee with you. Thanks for convening this hearing. Let's take a look here at something that Facebook, Meta, whatever, something that they've said, Mark Zuckerberg in particular said, or was reported in 2021, senior officials from the Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly this is Zuckerberg speaking, pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. Ultimately, it was our decision whether or not to take the content down. Now, the point that I want to get at, and maybe I'll start with you, Ms. Hemingway, because you and your outlet were a target of a lot of this and were censored left, right, center. You personally were censored. Don't you think that Facebook needs to be held accountable for their role in all of this? I mean, so Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg says, oh, gosh, they were so mean to us, the Biden people, they threatened us, and they did. Biden did. Was that unconstitutional? I think it was. This is why that Supreme Court case that we've been talking about today, the Missouri case, is so significant. But isn't it also true that, as Zuckerberg himself says in the statement, it was their decision, they owned it, and truthfully, Facebook and others have a pattern of censoring long before this, the Hunter Biden laptop story. They gleefully, willfully censored on their own. They have been avid participants in this censorship campaign. Would you agree with that, Ms. Hemingway?
Yes, Mark Zuckerberg, who spent nearly $450 million in the 2020 election to control the outcome there, has recently done a few little things like saying, oh, I was sort of pressured to do this censorship, or, oh, I'll give $1 million to the inauguration committee, as if this in any way makes up for the campaign of censorship that he was engaged in, which was probably valued even more than the money he gave to the election, to censor and silence voices like mine and my publication because we said things on all sorts of topics that were at odds with what he wanted, whether that's the radical trans agenda, how elections should be run, how to respond to the COVID pandemic, all sorts of topics where in a free society you should have free and open debate, and he worked very hard to keep that from happening. So I find these statements kind of interesting, but they nowhere near deal with the agency that he had on this and how much power he has as the head of Facebook.
Yeah, I'm glad you just used the word power because that's a big part of this story, isn't it? Companies like Facebook, Meta have enormous structural power that Mark Zuckerberg has spent, to your point, he has spent billions of dollars amassing. He has worked to destroy competitors who might break that power up, challenge that power in any way. He has used that power to stifle competition. He's used it to stifle views he doesn't like. This is a textbook example of what happens when a monopoly that has a political agenda, in this case a very hard-edged political agenda for years, when they use that monopoly in order to try to control other competitors and also to try to control the information that flows to the American people. Do I have that right, do you think?
Yes, and the political system itself, which had previously been so supportive of him, and the work that he did to silence, again, not just in the election sphere, but those journalistic voices that were countering his preferred policy objective.
That's just terrific, and you are perfectly placed to talk about that and to bring this to light. I think it's so vital that we don't lose sight of the role that these massive companies, and there's just a few of them. I mean, it's Google, it's Meta, that the control that they have amassed and that they have used to try and dictate, frankly, what Americans can see. And we know in the case of Google, we've had testimony in this committee and subcommittees before, Google has rigged their search results to try and influence independent voters and try to sway elections for years, and not just in this country. They've done it in other countries. They've done it in Australia. These are massive monopoly corporations that have political agendas that have been using their market power to try and influence. Actually, that's not strong enough to try and control outcomes in our political system. That is a problem. And I would just submit, until we deal with their power, this problem is going to persist. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Chairman, thank you for having this great hearing.
Thank you, and that will conclude the hearing. I want to thank the witnesses for being here. Thanks for your testimony. Thank you all.